Interact SSAS is a policy-driven application. These policies cover all rules that apply to Social Security agencies and are configurable by the user. This is why the product can be used by Social Security agencies and insurance boards across the world because of the flexible setup of the system without the need for coding. Let's take a look at some of the key processes in Interact's Social Security Administration system. Before anyone can access the Social Security Administration's systems online, they will need to register and be approved. The registration is very straightforward, but depending on the type of user, different documents will be required to prove identity and to get access to the system. These registration forms can be modified as required to fit country-specific needs. Registration forms differ for individuals versus employers and even financial institutions. All registrations then go through a workflow and will be reviewed before access is approved. Once this is done, individuals will be able to apply for a Social Security number if they don't already have one, and employers will be able to apply for their employer identification number online. While the Interact application is designed for global use and comes with a complete set of standardized generic forms for each process that is typical in Social Security agencies, the purpose of this particular video is to focus primarily on some country-specific forms, using the example of the Marshall Islands. The message being that any country deploying Interact SSAS for its Social Security or insurance schemes will be able to use standard generic forms available already or have country-specific forms deployed when required. Let's start with the application forms for a Social Security number or an employer identification number. To access the Social Security number application form, I'll log in as an individual who has already been registered, and I select the application form. Here I get a Marshall Islands specific form that allows me to submit all of my information online. The instructions for the form are shown at the bottom, but we can also have them pop up for you prior to accessing the form itself. You can see that the form captures all standard demographic information about me and details about my Social Security status. I can also attach a document as proof of birth or any other mandatory document. Once this form is completed, I can submit and it will be sent electronically to the Social Security agency. The application will remain online for me to retrieve anytime I want to review it, or I can also print out a copy of it. Before we move on, we can look quickly also at what a more generic standardized Social Security application form would look like, that you can see here. The same type of data is collected, but the formatting is obviously different. For employers, the relevant application is the one for the employer identification number. All relevant information about the business and owners or principals is captured here, and once this is done, the employer can also attach any relevant documents with their submission. The generic version of this form can be seen here. And again, it is clear that the data captured is similar but not identical, and the formatting is, of course, different. Employers can also attach their documents here as part of their application. Once the applications have been submitted, the staff at the Social Security Administration will be notified. They can retrieve all the details online, review and approve, or send it back for correction if anything is missing or inaccurate. Now let's look at other forms available online for the Marshall Islands. We'll start with employers and look at their key processes. Employers will be filing quarterly tax returns, processing payments of Social Security taxes against these returns, and they'll be receiving and processing penalties, if applicable in the case of late filing or late payments. They will be able to see all information online and track their account and payments status at all times. A standard generic tax filing looks like this. It will have a detailed employee timesheet summary, specific details on the actual wages and salary of each employee as per the local legislation and tax rules, and the overall summary on the quarterly tax return. The same can be achieved with country-specific forms as shown here for the Marshall Islands. Keep in mind that once the system has all the employee records on file, most of this information can be auto-populated by the system, and employers will only need to edit for changes. Also, instead of having to manually enter the details for each individual employee, the system will come with import tools, which carefully validate the data imported, and will populate the forms to a high degree already. In this same location, employers will be able to see any penalties that have been assessed due to late filings of taxes or late payment of taxes. Note that employers will be sent automatic reminders and communications from the Social Security to ensure they are aware of any upcoming deadlines to minimize instances of late payment or late filing penalties. Now let's turn to the activities of individuals who have self-service access. Individuals can now request changes to the information that is on record with the Social Security agency. All these changes can be done online, securely, and with the same proof and verification as if it were done in person. Change requests will be reviewed by the administration and only approved if everything checks out. One example is the request for a change of address. This is a simple form which will populate the original address on record and then allow the individual to submit a new address instead and include proof of address. There is also a standard form for any other changes in individual registration information. The system will always display the info that's already on file for the individual and allow the individual to then submit the changes, which will only take effect after approval. Now let's look at how individuals can apply for different benefits. The choice of benefits will of course depend on each country, and these will be configured using the policy setup in the system. Generally, you can expect to see the following types of benefits at a minimum: a full or early retirement benefit, a disability benefit, a lump sum payment benefit, a survivor benefit, or any other supplementary income benefit. We'll briefly look at the claims forms for each one of these types as they are created for the country used in this example, the Marshall Islands. If I meet the right conditions for retirement, I can submit an application for full or early retirement benefits. In this example, this application mimics the original paper forms in use in the Marshall Islands, with the difference that the data will be captured electronically. The data input can be validated immediately against the existing database, and it can be partially populated with data that's already available with the administration. You can see at the bottom that the system lists the documents that need to be attached to the form in order to submit the application. The level of data validation to be performed and the amount of information that will be auto-populated will all be determined and modified in the setup of the system as and when applicable. The generic form of the same retirement benefit application looks different, but of course fundamentally covers the same type of information. What if instead of applying for retirement, I want to apply for disability insurance benefits as an individual? In that case, I can do so by filling in this form online. Note that while the form is empty at this moment, if we have the profile of the person in the system, we could auto-populate many of these fields already to minimize the amount of data entry and eliminate the risk of mistakes. Here in this form, you can see that we capture in Part 1 all standard demographic data in addition to employer and salary information. In Part 2, we look at the disability causing the claim itself, when it happened, how it happened, etc. Now, as you can imagine, such claims may require significant additional medical paperwork, and therefore the applicant can first of all complete a standard authorization to disclose medical information, which you can see here. This authorization will be required to obtain the following medical source statement. All these forms can be submitted online, so medical professionals can also be given access to submit such forms online without the need for the patient or applicant to visit in person to carry the forms from one location to another. If I get approved for any benefits, I'd want the money to be deposited directly into my account, probably. Therefore, the easiest way is for me to submit my bank detail information online, securely, so that the SSA can easily process my payments. All I need to do is submit this form to achieve this. In cases where the default recipient of benefit payments is not able or willing to receive the payments, I can agree to receive payments on their behalf by submitting an application to be selected as a payee. Another application that individuals can submit, depending on the circumstances, is the application for survivor insurance benefits. This application first captures all information regarding the death of the deceased. Then it moves on to essential info about the applicant. After this, it captures all info about the surviving spouse of the deceased, and finally the details about the surviving children. In a similar vein, I may want to apply for a lump sum benefit payment. Keep in mind that, as with all forms that are filled in online, it is possible to make certain fields mandatory and others optional to ensure that essential information is always captured and no incomplete applications are submitted. Finally, in the case of individuals, there is another claim that can be filed online, which is the lump sum death benefit claim. This application captures all relevant information about the deceased, their employer, surviving relatives, and more. All of the forms shown here are specific to one country, but they are also linked with underlying data sets that are common to any country using Interact's Social Security Administration system. This means the forms are just the user interface, but the underlying logic is built on generic and highly configurable business rules, which are configured in the system's policy setup and can be modified whenever the legislation or business rules change in a country. Now, if employers have submitted their tax returns and these have been reviewed and approved, then they will be able to submit their tax payments. These payments can be made online in a secure way. Once the accounts are updated, the employers will be able to see their entire payment history and account statement online, as per the most recent information available with the Social Security. The Social Security, on the other hand, will of course also need to process benefit payments to the various beneficiaries. These payments of pensions, disability benefits, or survivor benefits are all managed through Interact's Benefits Payments Processing Engine. The pay periods are flexible, just like the benefit policies themselves. The periodic and standard payment runs are done right here and will follow a careful sequential process with trial steps at each stage to make sure that all data can be verified and corrected if necessary before the payments are finalized. Any benefit payments that need to be made outside of the normal payment cycle can be done through the off-cycle benefit payment process. This off-cycle process also has its own trial or simulation steps, which allow for careful reporting and review before finalizing the payments. Finally, the system also supports calculating and charging of penalties to employers for late submission of tax returns or for late payment of Social Security taxes. These penalties can be applied automatically or at the discretion of the officers in charge. Once applied, the employers will be notified automatically and can process their payments also through their self-service page.